Hi, I'm Alan Elfman. We're here at the Sedona International Film Festival in the media room. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, no, it's actually our pleasure. Why don't you tell the world, because we are actually live streaming this on television and on the internet. Why don't you tell them who you are and with what film?
Sure. So, my name's Amy Miller. I'm the writer, director, and one of the producers for The Carbon Rush. And The Carbon Rush is a feature documentary that's a global expose looking at the carbon markets and carbon offset projects and how they have impacts on communities around the world, and essentially how it's a false solution to the climate crisis.
Now, with that, because it sends such a strong message, with a lot of the films, usually they have a softer approach. Yours is not like that, is it?
Well, the Carbon Rush, it's a film that is a very moving and transformative film where when people have those aha moments. I'm extremely inspired by Paulo Freire, the grandfather of popular education, and the Carbon Rush kind of really works in that idea of if people can learn and connect the dots of what's happening in different communities around the world, then they can have those experiences where they say, aha, I get it, I understand, and then they're moved to transform their own lives and the communities they live in. So yeah, it is a very, hard-hitting documentary. People walk out of it feeling very moved and wanting to make the world a better place. And sometimes you can do it with sugar, and sometimes you can do it with some spice, and it's a film with a lot of spice.
Well, for the people who are watching this and the viewers, why don't you, who don't know what a carbon rush is, why don't you explain to them what it is?
Sure. So the carbon market was essentially started up by the United Nations as supposedly a means to mitigate carbon emissions that are happening around the world. So the idea is if you're a company and you're polluting 1 ton of carbon, you can essentially continue to pollute. In exchange, you'll buy a carbon credit. And that'll have a dollar value to it that's set up by this market. And that credit can be used for what's called a carbon offset project. Now, the idea of these projects is that somehow, somewhere, it's going to be doing something green. So, for example, one of the first examples in the film we look at in Brazil, in Minas Gerais, where there's eucalyptus plantations that has a biogas incineration. And these eucalyptus trees, what happens is that they're turned into charcoal through being burned, which we know pollutes, and then they're actually turned into steel and then converted into automobiles. So it's quite absurd to think that these eucalyptus plantations that has a biogas process to it could somehow be reducing carbon emissions when we know that they're being turned into charcoal, and then the steel that's being made from this charcoal is then being turned into cars, which are polluting. So it's a clear example of the absurdity. But because it's been certified as a so-called green carbon offset project, companies who pollute can pay for a carbon credit to go to these projects. And so the film goes through a series of examples around the world. We learned examples in India, in Brazil, in Panama, and in Honduras. And we see how it's actually not only it's also not reducing carbon emissions, but it's actually having devastating consequences on the communities that have to live with these projects. And the reason why it has devastating consequences is often these projects are coming in without the consent of the communities. They end up displacing the communities and taking away their basic livelihood. So we're talking about small-scale farmers who used to be able to do small-scale subsistence farming that are displaced and can no longer do that. But not only just that, we're seeing that many of these projects have serious environmental consequences as well.
Well, aside from a resonating message, you also offer solutions within your documentary. So they're proactive. You're giving the viewers an opportunity to see what effects your message is sending and how to solve them at the same time.
Well, the film ends with the message that we don't need to actually wonder what are the solutions. We already have them and we already know they exist. It's not a magic recipe. We need to stop polluting. And I strongly advocate that if we had a tax where people who were polluting had to pay right here, right now, then we'd see changes and we'd see a major reduction in pollution. It's about will, and it's about the power to implement, the will to implement this change. We can't continue to believe that the problem can be the solution. And if we understand that ever impeding capitalism that requires constant growth and constant resource extraction, if we understand that that is the problem, then we can't go around and say that that's also the solution. It requires us to reevaluate what's happening in our world and how we operate in terms of, are we functioning in a sustainable way? And once we come to terms and accept the fact that we can't continue to consume at the rate we do, and we can't continue to have the resource extractions that we do, then wait a minute, the solution becomes very evident. It requires a transformation and a shift.
I'm left in awe, and I want to see it right now. You've already had one screening of this, and how was that received?
It was a fantastic screening. It was sold out, and the audience just was totally into the Q&A and having a conversation, to the point that once the Q&A period was over, there was a nice group of 30 folks who just wanted to continue having the discussion and dialogue. And I really appreciate that. People were very moved, and people were very inspired to act.
So are you finding, while building this project and completion and post-production, because I know how grueling that can be in itself, were you welcomed from the start of the project, or did you also have resistance at the same time? Building the project, did you get, were you embraced open arms throughout the filming, the setup and the staging, or was there any opposition of the production?
Sure. Well, I mean, making independent critical documentaries that have a strong anti-capitalist, anti-colonialist point of view, it's never going to be an easy feat. But no independent documentary is going to be an easy feat. So it's a tremendous amount of effort and energy and resources to make any film, but also, when we're looking at one with a strong point of view. I don't think there's been any sort of censorship or resistance for my film per se based on the content, but I do think that whenever we have a critical documentary, the question is, will it get the type of distribution that it deserves? And within the media landscape that it exists in North America, often what will happen with a film like this is that it'll just get ignored. And so, I'm so pleased to be here in Sedona, and I'm so thrilled at the reception we have received, and I would just love for that to continue.
Well, we're pleased to have you, and Sedona is pleased to have you as well. Why don't you tell the viewers of where they can see more information about your documentary?
Sure. So there'll be another screening on Tuesday at 9:30 here at the Sedona Film Festival. But for folks who won't be able to check it out, they can check out the website, thecarbonrush.net, and you can actually buy DVDs online, and there's also option from iTunes and what have you for online screening.
Well, Amy, I want to thank you so much for taking the time, sending a message, and sitting with me today.
Thank you so much, Alan, for having me.
Have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.